Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Vegan Proteins Muscles by Brussels Radio. My name is Danny.
I'm Athena.
And this is episode 124.
Woohoo!
All right, guys. So we have Athena back again. So you know that means we're going to be talking about mental health stuff. But Athena did something really cool this weekend that I actually super wanted to go to and didn't get to. She went to the Vegan Women's Summit in New York City. How was that?
It was so amazing. It was in Brooklyn. Well, there was like 3 parts actually. So the first part I didn't go to, but the mayor basically like invited the Vegan Women's Summit people to hear him talk, and that sounded really cool. I didn't get to go to that. But then the next day there was a big event in Brooklyn, which was like the main event, where it was just a bunch of vendors, vegan vendors, of course, with food, so much good food. A lot of fried food. There was so much fried food, but it was good, of course. And lots of like fashion and just like lots of, well-known vegans there talking about all of the things, the environment, the fashion industry, the animals. It was really nice. And it's open to women and men, but it was majority women. So it was kind of cool just to be surrounded by a bunch of women who are all entrepreneurs and working towards some kind of goal in terms of making veganism more mainstream.
Yeah, it looked super fun. And I was on a panel with an application for Mercy for Animals to like be one of the panelists for Mercy for Animals, but something happened with the application and it didn't even like go through basically. So it didn't even make it to the voting round because it just like didn't go through. And I was so excited when they called and asked me if I wanted to do it. I was like, yes, like so want to do this, but it didn't happen. But it's okay because I had the New England Veg Fest, which was on Sunday. So I wouldn't have been able to do both anyway. But did you get to go to any of the like panels or any of the talks?
Yeah, I did go to a couple of the panels. They were all throughout the day. I got to see Roddy, which if anyone knows, I love her. Roddy Devlukia. I think that's how you say it. Shetty. Anyways, she's Jay Shetty's wife, and I just love her. So I got to see her talk with Dada Eats, and there was Miyokos. That's how you say it. I never know how to say it properly.
Miyoko Shinner, and she's a goddess.
She was there. She spoke. I mean, there were just so many women that spoke. I couldn't even name them all because I don't know everyone by name. But I did get to see a lot of the panels, and it was really cool. And there was one specifically that I remember because it was about this goat. I don't remember the goat's name. I wish I did. Maybe you've heard of it.
A goat?
Yeah,
goat. Like goat?
Yeah, like okay. No, like the goat. Yeah. No, it was they were basically talking about how I forgot which country. I see this is pointless to even bring it up because I don't remember all the details. But specifically I remember it's a really big case right now where basically this goat was like given to this family to kind of like it was like this woman, it was this little girl's goat. Like it was her goat. She owned the goat. And the like government came in and took the goat and slaughtered it.
Yes, I heard about this actually. So it was the kid's goat, the kid's kid, I guess. And it was for the 4-H club, which is like animal agriculture based learning for children. So basically kids are given these animals and they have to raise them, and then they are brought to an auction to be sold for slaughter. And for a lot of kids, this is like their first introduction into like loving an animal and then like basically letting someone else kill it. It sounds horrifying to me. But the little girl decided she didn't want to. Like by the time it was old enough, she was like, no, I don't want to do that. So she changed her mind and the government was like, nope. And I think it was the police that like came and killed her goat. This I mean, what is wrong with people? Like what's wrong with people?
Yeah, it was her lawyer that was speaking actually. It was super interesting because like they went completely out of their way. I think she said like 500 miles or something like that to come pick up this goat when there's like so many other things the police could be doing.
Right.
It was ridiculous to hear about, but it made me so sad because It's a goat.
Yeah. And the poor little girl is gonna have to like she's gonna
Oh,
be messed up. Why would she ever trust anybody like ever again, you know?
especially the
I don't know.
police.
Yeah, it's really pretty awful. And then I bet Miyoko's talk was probably very interesting if you got to see that too. So I 100% stand with Miyoko. So Miyoko, she has the cheese company. She also was on like the ground floor of a lot of companies like Gardein, making all of these very realistic mock meats. Like a lot of that came from her recipes and her techniques. So she's kind of a cornerstone in the vegan community. And then she started this vegan cheese company, which is far and away the best vegan cheese company in the world. And I mean, it's a pretty big company now. She started it all by herself. You can find it in places like Target.
It's everywhere.
Basically, as the company grew, you know, they hired a board and various people and they voted her out. Like they voted Miyoko out of her own company. And they were as condescending as to say that Miyoko took it from 0 to 1%, and we want to take it from 1 to 100. And it's like, go F yourself. Like, how could you say that's 0 to 1% when she's like, anyway, super, super, super shitty. And I guess it happened last summer, like not this summer, but last summer. But we didn't, like, the public didn't know about it until, you know, late winter. So,
Yeah, it's
I,
pretty insane. It's really sad.
yeah, it's horrible. And I get so sad when I hear about companies voting out their like founders, even if they're not like great business people. I don't know. I don't know. It's just all makes me mad. So I would have
Yeah.
been very curious to hear what she had to say.
Yeah, I didn't hear much of her talk. I was kind of all over the place just like talking to people. But yeah, that's a really messed up thing that happened.
Yeah, totally. Well, that's not what we're actually talking about today. Today, we are going to be, like I said, talking about mental health. Surprise, surprise, which is kind of like Athena's expertise, which is why we want her to be on for these episodes specifically. But I really wanted to talk about depression, basically. I mean, I think that depression is a lot more prevalent than many people realize. I think there are people out there that are struggling with depression that don't even realize that they're struggling with depression. But then there are a lot of people who can recognize when they're in like a depressive episode, but they don't know what to do about it or how to care for themselves in those moments to try to make like the transition out of it smoother. And I wanted to kind of chat about all that. So, first of all, you said you wanted to talk about like depression versus like sadness. And I think that's a good place to start because they're not the same thing. So why don't you go ahead and talk about that?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people use the word depression very frequently nowadays. And I'm not saying people aren't depressed, but there's a big difference between being clinically depressed compared to feeling sadness, which is a very normal emotion. Everyone feels sadness. You can't not feel sadness. Everybody feels sadness. And I think a lot of the time, what we don't recognize is just how to cope with that feeling. We also don't know like what amount of sadness is normal, to what extent should I be feeling the sadness, how deeply am I feeling the sadness. Like we don't really understand all of the um just inner workings of sadness. And I think it's just easy to say, okay, I'm depressed because I feel sad sometimes. But the reality is when you're clinically depressed, that's that has to affect your lifestyle. So that has to literally be affecting your life. Someone that's clinically depressed is not showing up for work, they're not hanging out with their friends, they're not really talking to people. It's affecting their life. In a negative way. So the difference between sadness or feeling sad sometimes or feeling depressed sometimes is that it's normal. Sadly, it's not a comfortable feeling, and I'm definitely not saying that it is, and it's not easy. But feeling sad sometimes, feeling depressed sometimes is a normal experience that we all experience. Whereas when you're clinically depressed, it's significantly impacting your life in a negative way, as I mentioned. So I think that's a good place to start, is like the difference between feeling sad and the difference between being clinically depressed.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. Like normal ups and downs of moods are normal, right? And sometimes we go through periods where we are happier, and sometimes we go through periods where we are less happy or less energetic, or less like passionate or motivated or interested in what we're doing. But clinical depression is really a combination of kind of all of those things and a lot of other symptoms as well that can or cannot be present for people. But like you said, it's a longer duration, and it's to the point where it will affect, yeah, your relationships, um, your work performance, your sleep, the way your body literally feels. It can affect all of those things. So I
Mm-hmm.
guess first and foremost, if you think that you might be struggling with depression, and there are different levels of depression as well, right? Even clinically, there's major depressive disorder all the way over here. And then there's things like anhedonia, all the way over here. And that's like basically when you realize the things that used to make you happy basically bring you no joy anymore. And you're just like, what is that about? Like, if you think you're experiencing any of that, you should at least bring it up to your doctor, just as like a jumping off point. They're not always super well trained in mental health, but they can usually at least point you in the right direction or give you a referral to somebody who is. So,
Well, with that, I would like to know that most doctors will go straight to a prescription,
mm-hmm.
whereas I would recommend trying, and I know this is not something everyone is able to do, but trying to see a mental health professional specifically, or getting a referral from your doctor to see a mental health professional, because doctors aren't trained in mental health to the extent of a mental health professional, obviously. But usually doctors are trained to, give you a prescription in terms of how to go about what you're feeling, what you're experiencing. Whereas someone that is a psychologist or a social worker or a therapist or a counselor, whatever, they're trained to, not only hear you out, talk to you, but also teach you the skills of how to cope with those feelings rather than going straight to the drug, which I'm not saying I'm anti-drug or pro-drug, but I think it's always a good idea to learn how to cope with those feelings, because that's a big thing that most people don't know how to do, unfortunately, because we don't teach it in schools.
Right. And I think an explanation, I couldn't keep these straight for a very, very long time. The difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist. You want
Mm-hmm.
to touch on that just like a little bit?
Yeah, a psychiatrist is a doctor. Well, a psychologist can be too, but a psychiatrist is who prescribes drugs. They
Mhm.
prescribe the medications. Um, they usually have shorter sessions with you, and that's typically they have like the shorter sessions, and then they prescribe antidepressants, anxiety, whatever you need. Whereas a psychologist, a which can also be a doctor, but they're not able to prescribe medication. So they are only there to talk to you, to maybe figure out if you need to see a psychiatrist. They're there to guide you through that. But they cannot prescribe medication, whereas a psychiatrist can. And your sessions with a psychologist will be a lot longer. It's talk therapy, or whatever they're trained in. But
Yeah. And therapists and social workers are on that psychology side. They also cannot, not only can I correct me, please, if I'm wrong, not only can a therapist or a social worker not prescribe, but they also cannot diagnose, right? Like,
um, I I guess I can't touch on that because now I'm not 1000% sure. I'm
yeah.
pretty sure a psychologist. I won't even say anything because now I
Yeah,
don't.
I know a psychologist can diagnose. And I know that when like a therapist has to bill your insurance, they have to put down their best guess of a diagnosis, but
Yeah.
I don't think a therapist can actually diagnose you with something.
Yeah, I guess it would depend on the degree that someone has.
Yeah, I suppose that it would.
Yeah.
But
Um,
it's all very interesting stuff, but don't just
yeah.
think, don't paint every mental health professional with the same brush, I guess, because they do all do different things. And like you said, they're all trained in different modalities too, like CBT or DBT or EMDR, right?
Yeah.
There's like a ton of different things that you can do, family-based therapy or trauma-based therapy or whatever. Anyway, but I also want to talk about like how common this is, because yes, sadness and depression, they're different things, but I think that when somebody is struggling with a depressive episode, regardless of the like intensity of it, it usually feels like you're the only one in the world who's going through this, and like you're broken and something is wrong with you specifically. And I was, even before we even decided to do this podcast, I was looking this up recently to see like how many people in their lifetime will struggle with clinical depression. And it's a lot. It's like 1 in 3 women and 1 in 5 men.
Mm.
And that's the people who are talking about it, right?
Yeah.
So like you can assume that the number of people who are actually dealing with it is probably higher than that. But 33% of women and 20% of men, as it stands right now, will experience at least one bout of depression in their lifetime. And that's enough so that we should definitely be talking about it,
Yeah.
you know,
Hmm.
because it is very scary when you are going through it. And I say that from experience. Like I have absolutely experienced depressive episodes more than once in my life. Um, and it took me years at one point to even realize that's what was happening. It's
Hmm.
like a slow boil where like the symptoms kind of creep on and you just keep attributing a symptom to one thing or one symptom to another thing until one day, for whatever reason, it just assembles in front of you and you're like, holy shit, I'm depressed. Because so many of
Yeah.
us think depression is sadness,
Yeah.
right? But I don't
Yeah. There's
think,
so much vice versa going on.
yeah, but I don't think you feel, and I'm sure everybody's experience is different, but I don't think that you feel sad when you're clinically depressed. You feel nothing a lot of the
Mhm.
time. Like you feel complete
Empty.
apathy about like so many things. You feel no like excitement about anything, and you feel like you logically, you should be excited about this thing, but you're just not. Um,
Mhm.
so I think that's why it sneaks up on people, because they're like, I'm not sad. My life is good. Like I know my life is good.
Yeah.
Anyway, um,
Yeah. And I think something you said too, like you said, like bouts of depression. I think that's important to mention too, because I think a lot of the time people think if they're depressed, they're going to be depressed forever, or that it is like if you're diagnosed with depression, that it's like a life sentence of like, okay, I am depressed. That is who I am. I'm a depressed person. And that's not the case for the majority of people. I won't say for everyone, but for the majority of people, depression is something that we can work through. Not saying it's easy, but it is something that usually can come in waves, or you can have an episode like you mentioned, and it's a part of your life that happened, but it's not necessarily a life sentence. They're gonna be depressed forever.
yeah,
And I think another thing is like talking about like the symptoms of depression. Like maybe you want to talk about kind of what you experience. I'm sure like you already mentioned like kind of lack of feelings, not enjoying things that you used to enjoy. Those are signs. Um, I don't know if you want to mention some other ones, even though this is personal.
oh yeah, no, I don't mind. Sleep disturbances, whether that's sleeping too much or sleeping too little, sleeping at odd hours, being just constantly tired no matter how much you sleep, to the point that for a while I was like, do I have a deficiency in, like, I thought it was a vitamin deficiency. It wasn't. I would keep going and getting my blood tested and everything kept coming back fine and coming back fine. So this is how, I kind of figured out that's what it was by process of elimination of
Yeah.
other things that I thought it was first. Fatigue, but not just fatigue like, oh, I'm tired, like actual literal body aches that don't make sense. Like your poor recovery from your workouts can be part of it. If you're even able to work out, which, very luckily I was able to work out through most of that period. Sexual disturbances are really common for both men and women. Moodiness. This was one that I really struggled with a lot, actually, was I would wake up and in my head, I'd be like, we're going to be nice today. We are going to be friendly and upbeat. And like the first thing somebody would say to me, I would respond back to them and I could hear it. And I'd be like, why? Why do you have to sound so bitchy right now? Like you're not even mad or upset. And people would be like, wow, you sound unhappy. And I'd be like, I'm not unhappy. I'm fine. And I wasn't doing it on purpose. And it's something that now I do recognize it when it's happening to other people. When you hear somebody like, ooh, somebody's grouchy today. And they're like, I'm not grouchy, I'm fine. And you're like, okay, sure you are. But like things like that are having like a short fuse with people that you're close to, but also sometimes people you're not close to, not wanting to socialize at all. Like even with people that you actually like, just not having it in you to socialize at all. And I'm not talking about just introversion. I'm talking about like literally
the
avoiding
lack of
people.
wanting to, like you just don't even want to text them, call them, see them.
Yeah. All things like that. And I'm certain that there's, poor work performance. Luckily, very, very luckily, that never happened to me. I mean, who knows? Maybe my performance could have been better, but I didn't like have that noticeable just like tank in my work quality or anything. I'm struggling to keep up with like general self-care, like physical hygiene stuff is something that a lot of people struggle with. At the time I did not have the luxury to not keep myself up because I worked in the service industry. So, you can't just like not shower and go bartend, but man, I didn't want to, and things like that. The combination of all of those things can almost just make you feel like you're a ghost, just like floating through your own life. It's pretty scary, and you can't, when you're really in it, you can't see a way out. Like you don't see a solution to it, which is why so many people, I think, just like they just accept it, that that's their fate from now on, that this is who they are and the end, and they don't seek any treatment or help. Hang on. You can keep talking. I have to get this cat to walk away. Can you hear him? He's driving me crazy. Hang on.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say that I think everything you just shared was actually really beautiful, because I think a lot of people are going to listen and just be able to relate to that. And it's a really sad thing that most people are going to be able to relate to it, but it's also a beautiful thing because it's opening people up to the realization that you're not alone. Like other people have felt this way, do feel this way, and it's unfortunately a part of the human experience, kind of going through these lows and highs. And I think it's really nice for people to hear that, of like, yeah, you've been through that. And online everything looks so beautiful and like everyone's perfect online, but you being able to show that other side of yourself, I think is very helpful for people to realize, like, oh, she seems like she has it all together, but she's also been through this. She's been through what I'm feeling. And I think that's something that we need to talk about more, of the fact of like many people have felt these things, gone through these things, and you're not alone. Anyone who's listening, you're literally not alone.
Yeah.
It feels like it.
It absolutely feels like it. Especially when you have any kind of like image that you have to maintain to stay afloat, and everybody does. It's not just social media people, social media stars that have an image to maintain. Most people have to show up to work and they need to appear like they have their shit together no matter what, to like keep their job going, to keep the respect of their coworkers, to keep their family or their kids from being afraid that everything is falling apart. Like we all have like an air that we have to maintain for a variety of reasons. And it can feel like you're faking it a lot of the time. And I actually don't think that's true. I think that is just like, those are your survival skills. That's how you're keeping it together. Like this is a coping mechanism. And I think that it's totally valid. And I don't think people are faking it if they kind of generally appear like, oh, they're doing pretty well. Things are going pretty well. But like inside, like something isn't right. Like I'm off. I have to work on this. But also it's like such a dark, kind of vulnerable, scary place. You're like, okay, I don't want to like share this with the world while it's happening. Like
Yeah.
that's too much,
Yeah. That's the other thing, is that because we feel so alone, it's so hard to get out of it because we don't feel like anyone cares, or we're telling ourselves stories that no one cares, or that we're going to be here forever. We're going to be like this forever. And it's so hard to open up when you're feeling already so vulnerable and down. But the reality is that someone cares. Like,
Mhm.
I care. I know you care. Like
Yeah.
anyone listening to this, if you're feeling any like super low, like I care.
Mhm.
Reach out.
Yeah.
Because I know it's so hard to open up to anyone. And it's also hard because, you might not be comfortable with the people in your lives. Maybe you just don't feel comfortable with how they'll react. Which is why, if you have the ability, I do recommend a mental health professional, or just someone you really, really trust and, know will be there for you no matter what. And on top of talking about all the symptoms, I think it could also be helpful to talk about ways to be there for someone that's going through something
Mm.
like this, on top of how to get out of it. I think those are two things we should definitely talk about.
Yeah, because like if you haven't, oh man, I have so much to say about this.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
first, one other thing I wanted to add is a lot of people who are in this situation, they are constantly like telling themselves they shouldn't be there. They're like,
Mhm.
I have no reason to feel like this. My life is good. I love my family. I have a good paying job. I have a roof over my head. Like, what do I have to be depressed about? So shut up and deal with it. Like, you shouldn't talk to yourself like that, but that's how a lot of us do try to figure out what we're going through. We're like, depressed? No, that doesn't make sense. To be
Yeah.
depressed, you need to have a really good freaking reason to be depressed. And that's not true. Like, sometimes there's a trigger that like kicks it off. Sometimes there's nothing. Sometimes it's like your genetics,
Mhm.
like you're just more predisposed to have these sorts of episodes, and it's not your fault. Like it's just how your brain was wired. And that doesn't mean you can't rewire it, but it's you don't have to have the biggest sob story on earth to deserve to have depression and to deserve to get treatment for that depression.
Hey listeners, we hope you have been enjoying this episode and we appreciate your love of all things vegan fitness. For those of you who want even more support on your vegan fitness journey, check out our Muscles by Brussels community and become a member. By joining the team, you are one of our exclusive VIPs. As a member, you'll find over 200 macro-friendly, high-protein recipes that can meet any of your meal planning needs. You'll also receive training programs that update monthly. This training has progressive overload built into it, so you can be sure if you're following the program, you are making progress. All of this and more is located inside our Vegan Proteins members only app. As a Muscles by Brussels member, you'll unlock bonus courses, challenges, and more every month. You'll also be invited to our live Zoom video calls, which happen 2 times a month, and are absolute gold to those who show up. And if you can't make the calls, don't worry, you have the opportunity to email us whenever you want. You'll receive a video response to all of your questions from one of the coaches here at Vegan Proteins every time you message us. Members also receive 40% off many of our other services. And of course, our private community of like-minded individuals is like no other. Best of all, you can try this membership out for a full month at no cost to you with this special offer for our listeners only, because we appreciate and want to fully support you. Use the link in our show notes to sign up for your free trial today. We hope to see you on our next live coaching call.
If you compare your life to someone else's, like you can always find someone's life who is worse, but that doesn't mean that your experiences are any less than theirs. And I think we do that far too often, of comparing our experiences to someone else's. And in some cases that can actually be really helpful. Like in some cases, if you're doing that for yourself to feel better, it can be really helpful. If I'm having a bad day and then I start thinking, well, I'm really glad that like I do have a roof over my head, I'm not starving, like that can be very helpful for me. But if someone else was to say that to me, that would be very, very not helpful.
Right.
I think of invalidating. That's the word I was looking for. That'd be very invalidating. So there's cases where it is good to do it because it can be helpful for yourself to compare your life to someone that may be experiencing something less, but also recognizing that just because someone else is experiencing something, subjectively worse, it doesn't mean that your experience is any less than theirs, because, you can't compare sadness.
Yeah.
It's sadness no matter what.
And it is it's like a fine line, I think, between finding reasons to be thankful, like finding gratitude in your life, and shaming yourself for not just being more grateful for what you have anyway. Like it's a fine line, I think. But you're right. When other people point it out, that's terrible. So to your point about like, how do you be there for somebody who is struggling with depression or with their mental health? Because I think especially if people have not experienced it themselves, it is very hard to make sense of what you're seeing sometimes. It's very easy for you to look at your friend and be like, what do you have to be sad about? Pull yourself together. Why can't you just make your bed? Why can't you just take a shower? Like that, for I think a lot of people, that is their knee-jerk reaction. And on one hand, I get it. Like you're seeing somebody suffering and you're like, come on, like just do this thing and it will get better. But that type of attitude can be way more harmful than helpful. So I'd actually like to hear like your suggestions on the best way to be there for somebody that is going through something like this.
Okay, I think that's a good question. I think the best way to be there for someone is just to be there. Like that is just the easiest way I can put it, is just be there. Don't try to cheer them up all of the time. Don't try to make things better in terms of saying things like what you just mentioned. Of like, come on, if you just do this, you're going to feel better. Just sit there with them. Just be there with them. Spend time with them doing things that, they know that, or that they might enjoy. So maybe if they're having a hard time getting out of bed, go to their house and watch a movie with them. If they're having a hard time eating, don't force them, but maybe order some pizza for you guys, get some popcorn, like just be there for them, listen to them. Don't tell them what they should be feeling. Don't tell them to stop being sad. Like just be there. Don't tell them everything happens for a reason. You're gonna get out of this. We've already talked about that. People just need you to sit with them. That's what they need. They don't need you to make things better. They just need to know that you're there no matter what, and that you're going to help them by being there.
Yeah.
I think that's the best thing that you could possibly do. And, inviting them to things, but also not pressuring them.
Right.
Keep them in a loop, but not forcing them.
You know what I love? Did you watch Winnie the Pooh as a kid?
Oh, well, yeah, I don't remember it much, but yeah.
Okay. So some people listening will remember, I'm sure. Eeyore.
Yeah.
Eeyore was clinically depressed. That is the saddest, most depressed donkey on the planet. He's not happy about anything. He's not mean or anything, but he's like, I don't want to diagnose a stuffed donkey, but I'm pretty sure he was depressed. But here's the thing, like all of his friends did that. They did exactly what you said. They still hung out with him. They didn't make fun of him or insult him for kind of being sullen all the time. They invited him to things and sometimes he didn't go, but they were just still so kind to him all the time. And I was like, that's it. That is how people should be treating people with depression is like Eeyore's friends treated him.
So great.
watch one episode that has Eeyore in it, and you're gonna be like, oh my God, he was depressed and his friends were so great.
Yeah, I think that's so true, because I think a lot of the time we feel uncomfortable when someone's sad. We feel uncomfortable if they're feeling those feelings, when we need to learn how to sit with that and sit with that discomfort, because the person doesn't need you to fix anything to make yourself feel better, because at the end of the day, that's what it's going to do. If you're feeling uncomfortable with this person that's feeling sad, maybe it's time to work on like, why am I feeling this way? But also just learning, like, you don't have, just knowing in your head, like, it's not your job to fix anything. That is going to be such a huge thing when spending time with someone that's feeling depressed. Just recognizing, like, it's not your job. You aren't there to fix it.
Yeah.
You can't fix it. No matter what you say, you can't fix it. The best thing that you can do is just be present, like Pooh Bear. Like, just be present. Just be there for them and listen to them.
This is a side note, but there is a book out there called The Tao of Pooh.
Oh.
And it is like Buddhist philosophy using Winnie the Pooh, and it is just like top tier literary work. Like, I recommend it to everybody. Winnie the Pooh like knew what was up a long time ago. But yeah, you're totally right. And the other thing is, like I mentioned, like with the moods, the moodiness that depressed people can be experiencing, it is so hard, but try not to take that personally.
Yeah.
I'm not saying if they're like being abusive or something with their language, you should just sit there and take it, because you absolutely should not, because I don't care. Your mental health issues do not give you a right to like be abusive towards other people. So there's that. But if somebody else is just kind of like snappy with their responses or what, you try very hard to just imagine you're just in a bubble and it just bounces right off of you, because I can bet that they're not trying to do that. They're not doing it on purpose. Because I know when it was me, like, I remember thinking, like, why are you answering like that? But I just couldn't stop doing it at the time.
Yeah.
Another thing that I've like really worked on, because this is a problem for me, like, I mean, it makes me a great coach, but sometimes it can make me a not great friend or partner or family member or whatever, is I find solutions. That's what my brain is programmed to do, is to be like, you have this problem, here is a possible solution. Here is a possible solution. So sometimes when people would be sharing their struggles with me, I would just start brainstorming solutions for them. And like you said, sometimes that can make it so much worse. And now what I do is I will ask people, do you want me to listen, or do you want solutions? Like, do you just want support, or are we brainstorming here? Because sometimes they are. I mean, a lot of people do come to me because they want some ideas, but sometimes people just want to like unload. And for me to be like, yeah, that sucks. Like, I'm really sorry you're going through that. Even though my natural inclination is to be like, I've already thought of 10 ideas that you could try.
Yeah.
So just ask.
Yeah, I recommend that to everyone. I used to talk about that all the time, because the fact of the matter is, most of the time people do just want to complain. Most people just want to get it out, and they don't want you to come up with, again, a solution to fix things. Like, people generally don't want that. And even if they've complained about this one thing 5 times, like, they usually, like, unless you ask and they say yes, like, just sit there with it. And I know it can be annoying for the other person at times, but it doesn't really matter. You're there to be their friend. You're there to listen to them. You're there to support them. If that's what they need, then that's what you do. I mean, obviously, if it comes to a point where, I don't know, they've been complaining about the same thing for like months and months and months every single day, then it's like, okay. Like, there's obviously always a balance there.
I have one person in my life who's like that. When they start talking about the same problem we've been talking about for literally years, I say, oh, I'm not going to be listening to that today, because until you're willing to do something about it, I can't hear the same thing anymore. So, you can draw your own boundaries there as well. You don't just have to let somebody complain about the same thing forever. But yeah, sometimes sometimes people need to like have the same kind of vent session, 20 times before they decide they're ready to do something about it. And I do think that's part of being a friend, even when you're just like, oh, why are you still doing this?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I concur. There was something you said, but I can't remember. So I can't remember.
My compulsive brainstorming of solutions, it makes me great in business and coaching, but it makes me probably just like insufferable as a friend. So that's something that like I'm constantly, and even when I was in my depression, like the worst of it, I mean, I was still doing the same thing. I was constantly like, okay, here are the things we're going to try. And again, that's how I realized that's what it was because every single thing I was trying was just like not working, not helping, not giving me answers at all. So
Yeah.
pros and
Yeah, and I think I remember what I was going to say is that you were talking about just kind of like how you were talking to people and you couldn't change the way you were talking to them even though you could feel it. And I noticed that I definitely do that a lot with my mom specifically, and a lot of people do this with people that they're really close to.
Yes.
So like your friends that are really close to you, maybe they snap on you. It's because they I mean, it's like so counterintuitive, but they love you and they feel so comfortable to be able to snap at you because like I would never feel comfortable snapping at like a friend that I just met. Whereas like when it's my mom, like I know that no matter what, she's gonna love me.
Right.
So even though I don't really think about it that way, like sometimes we'll be having like a good day and I'll just like completely just like change my mood on her specifically. And I'm like, why am I doing this? But even in the moment, I just don't even have the like capacity to like say like, hey, I know I just snapped at you.
I know I'm being a brat, but
yeah. Sometimes I do recognize it like right away, and I'm like, okay,
yeah,
I need to stop. But it can be really, really hard. And with that, I think it's we can talk about like just ways to come out of that, like how to come out of the depressive episode that we're experiencing or depression or which is not as easy as it sounds, just coming out of it. It's really, really hard.
It's not, but there is really like promising data on this. Like up to 80% of people who seek treatment show some improvements in 4 to 6 weeks, up to 80%. Now that treatment can be a combination of therapy and medication. And actually that's what the research seems to show is the most effective, not medication alone, not therapy alone, the combination of them. So, figure that out for yourself, which path you want to go. But 2/3 of people, however, never seek treatment. So that I think is like the first hurdle is just like, hopefully you understand this is much more common than maybe it feels like it is. And nobody is going to think differently of you or worse of you if you go seek treatment somewhere. That's why all of these facilities and doctors and therapists and stuff, that's what they're there for. It's like the number one mental health issue ever, I think.
Yeah.
Anxiety might be giving it a run for its money, but it's up there. So
no, yeah, I concur. And I think speaking to men, speaking to you men, just to say it one more time, men are so much far less likely to seek any kind of mental health profession or professional, I mean. And I think that's really important to bring up too, is that, like women are more likely to seek professional help because we feel more comfortable doing that. And a lot of the time men still to this day like feel that like I need to be a man, like I shouldn't be feeling this way. I don't like deserve the help, like I just need to man up. And men don't cry, and that's not true. None of that's true. Men do cry. Men deserve to feel sadness. It's normal to feel sadness. And it's normal to feel anxiety, and it's normal to feel like you're having a hard time. And it's not just women who have emotions, men do too. And it's okay to seek help. And I think men are the leading, they're leading
group of people committing suicide.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
That's the way I was like, how should I word this?
Yeah, no, I knew exactly where you were going with it. Like men, when I see this 1 in 3 women have depression and 1 in 5 men have depression, I call bullshit, because I don't think I don't think it's that big of a difference. I think 1 in 3 women knew that they had depressive symptoms enough to go get diagnosed, and only 1 in 5 men did, you know? And I still think there's lots of people in both camps that probably didn't even know. You know, my therapist he kind of jokes that women are just so much better at therapy, period, because of how many men won't even walk through the door in the first place for all of the reasons you just said. And then if they do like muster up the courage to go do this, a lot of men have been like programmed to be so out of touch with their emotions for so long that, you know, they sit in that room on the couch and it takes them a lot longer to, the same way on this podcast, we talk about it all the time. Like if you've been dieting your whole goddamn life, you lose touch with your hunger signals, right? You don't even know when you feel hungry anymore because you've been deliberately ignoring that signal for so long. Now, if you're a guy who's been taught his whole life that he just needs to be like stoic and tough and steel himself against the world, and now you're trying to figure out what you actually feel, like you're not even going to be able to hear those things in the back of your mind yet. It's going to take a lot of time paying attention and trying to connect the dots. So I feel like when a lot of guys do go to therapy, they get frustrated sooner and decide this isn't working, this isn't for me, I'm out skis. And they like quit on it earlier than women do. Whereas women, you know, I think because we, one, are not taught usually to suppress our emotions in the same way that guys are, but also boys are raised to think that like their power is their physical strength, right? So they rely heavily on that. Whereas girls, we are not relying on our physical strength as children. We often are usually relying more on our emotional intelligence to navigate situations, whereas guys can kind of muscle their way through it. And that, you know, there are huge benefits to that in the long run. And I will say that is the patriarchy that's doing that. So the patriarchy hurts men too. I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah, it's fact. And it's okay for men to go to therapy. Woohoo! Just gonna continue to express that. I think that's one of the reasons they usually drop out, is because societal pressures makes them feel like they can't. But you are worthy, men and women, all of you.
And like, how long? I mean, I know this statistic that I found said that 80% of people will show improvement in 4 to 6 weeks. But like, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I cannot imagine only going to therapy for 4 to 6 weeks and thinking I'm going to be out of a depressive episode. So I think, I mean, I want to hear your thoughts, but I think it's kind of a long haul thing.
Yeah, I think, 4 to 6 weeks isn't a very long time. I think 4 to 6 weeks could definitely be helpful for someone that's experiencing something specific and they want to get through it. So I don't know, maybe you lost a furry friend, for example, like maybe 4 to 6 weeks of just kind of talking about that could be enough. But if you're feeling like you have depression, you're experiencing depression, you are going through a depressive episode, whatever it is, you're feeling a lot of sadness, like typically, I wouldn't say 4 to 6 weeks is going to be enough to completely, change the way you're thinking and offer yourself new ways to cope and all the tools and skills that you learn in therapy, which takes a long time. I've been in therapy for over a year, probably a year and a half now. And how long have you been in therapy?
I don't even know. I don't even
years.
Yeah. Years. So, and I still, a lot of people would say like, oh, well, see, there's proof that therapy is not working, right? Yeah. If you have to do it forever, then it's not working. I don't even consider it like, I'm still having all of these problems and I need to go in there and like really work through this like real nasty stuff every single week. We're not like digging up stuff from 30 years ago anymore. It's more like maintenance, like getting your oil changed in your car at this point is a constant, the same way people do check-ins with us where they come touch base, and sometimes people are just cruising and it's like, yeah, man, you're doing a great job. Here, let me point out some of your wins. Keep it up. Sometimes it's literally that, because it's easy to start to not recognize the things that you're doing well, or to not recognize areas where you might be starting to slip. And I think once you have experienced dramatic improvements in your mental health, why would you want to stop doing the thing that's helping you stay there? Like,
yeah. And you don't have to stay in therapy for years or even a full year. But typically I would say like a couple of months is helpful to like learn those skills, because nothing I've learned in therapy happened overnight. It's happened because I've been consistently going back and forth. And, you don't usually, most people aren't going to stick to like every single week for years on end.
Right.
Sometimes you go from like, every week to maybe every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks, maybe every other month. Like you can consistently push back until you feel a point where you're kind of ready to let go. And even when you let go, you can still say like, I'm just going to keep you kind of like on call. Like, if I need an appointment, I'll schedule with you, rather than completely letting them go. There's so many different options, but I think going for at least, I don't know, 6 months is a really good place to learn some things, unless you just have something very specific. But
yeah, like grief is a really great reason to go to therapy for something that's acute, but in my research about this stuff, it does seem to show that when you're experiencing depressive symptoms, the sooner you seek treatment, the easier and smoother the path out is going to be. So if you are someone who is like me, who was dealing with this for years, probably a decade, if I'm being totally honest, before I realized what was going on and actually started seeking treatment, if you've been stewing in that for a really long time, it's going to take you longer to come out of it, right? Again, going back to the fitness analogies, if somebody has gotten very, very unhealthy, that didn't happen overnight. That took a long time to get there. It's going to take a long time to get out. I feel like your brain is very similar. Like you can't just snap your fingers and come out of it. But I do think there are some like practical tips, my favorite thing, that you can do even when you're like in the worst of it, that can help you maybe like lift the fog a little bit. It's not going to like cure your depression. I'm not going to say like, oh, take a shower. No, it's not going to cure your depression, but it can like kind of just make things feel a little bit clearer, a little tiny bit brighter while you're going through it. So do you have any practical tips?
Yeah, I think, well, one kind of like what you just noted, like of taking a shower, there's this actual skill called opposite action, where you do the opposite of what you don't want to do because it will benefit you. So you don't want to take a shower, but you do it anyways because you'll feel better afterwards. You don't want to go for a walk, but you do it anyways because you'll feel a little bit better. And it's not an easy skill. It's hard, but I think, it's also the basis of forming a habit of like, okay, really don't want to do this. Understanding that, it'll make me feel better though. So like I'm going to do at least one thing, even if it's just one thing. Like you don't have to start big. You don't have to say, I'm feeling depressed, so I'm going to do everything. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to drink lots of water. I'm going to eat super healthy. I'm going to take a shower. I'm going to put a bunch of makeup on. Like just do one thing. Just do one thing. I'm just going to take a shower today. If that's the only thing you did that day, it's still a progress from yesterday.
Right.
So I think opposite action is one of my favorite skills because obviously, I mean, you're doing the opposite of what is going to be detrimental and doing something beneficial. But I think just putting it in that concept of like, okay, opposite action, like what don't I want to do? So I'm going to do it. Other thing, I would say the other biggest thing is reaching out to someone, which I know is so, so hard, but it's also another part of opposite action of like, maybe you just reach out to one person and just say like, hey, like I need you. Like just be honest. Like, hey, I need someone to be there for me. You don't have to reach out to everyone. You don't have to tell everyone what you're experiencing. Just reach out to one person. Someone specifically that you trust, love, and know will have a good response, because there are some people who might be very invalidating. So don't reach out to those people. Reach out to someone you trust, someone that you love. And that can be the hardest thing and the most beneficial, to just have someone in your corner knowing that you're going through something and that you at least have one person there for you can be a really beautiful thing to feel. Those are two of the biggest things that I like to practice. Self-soothing, well, that's another one. I know when I was like feeling really down for a period of time, this is like not the best thing because I was spending too much money, but I was getting Starbucks like every day. And I don't do that all the time, but I was feeling so down. And that was the one thing that just made me feel good, because it was just like the senses of it. And I was being mindful while I was drinking it. Like I was specifically practicing a self-soothing skill of being mindful. I would go to Starbucks, I'd go inside, I'd interact for like that 5 minutes of however long it takes to get my drink, and the rest of the day I'd be at home completely alone. But like I'd go in there, get my Starbucks, I'd feel it. It was nice and warm. I would take a sip. I would just notice all the flavors that I was experiencing, and just noticing the heat on my hands, and as it goes down your throat, and just being completely mindful in that experience. That is something that I enjoy. And there's lots of different self-soothing exercises you can do, like taking a bath, putting a candle out. Like there's lots of things you can do, but that was something I really enjoyed.
Yeah. I really like the idea of opposite action. I absolutely do that. Like I still do that, but I never heard it called that before. Like usually if my brain is going, I don't want to do this, like the more logical part of my brain goes, oh, that means you absolutely have to do this. Like when I feel that resistance to something, usually I realize that is actually a thing that I absolutely should be doing. It's going to make something better. Like and that goes from the things that you mentioned right down to like specific exercises in the gym. If there's an exercise that I'm just like, oh, I hate this exercise, I'm like, we need to do it more then. And I also think that goes back to like our last podcast episode talking about grit and how to build grit up. Like having some grit is, I think, helpful in pulling yourself slowly but surely out of a depressive episode. Putting on real clothes, like that for me was huge. I've worked from home for a really long time now, like way before the pandemic. And for the first couple of years, like I barely got like real dressed because I didn't have to. Like I wasn't going anywhere. I was just working on the computer. Like I don't have to wear pants if I don't want to. Nobody's gonna know, you know. I am just so well. You saw me let the cat in, but you know, I found that when you are just like kind of lazing around in pajamas all the time, you feel like you're just lazing around in pajamas all the time. Like you feel lazy when you are in your pajamas all the time. And pajamas are comfy and I love pajamas, but now I put them on like intentionally. And one of the first things I do after I have my coffee in the morning is get dressed. I mean, my quote unquote real clothes are like gym clothes. So some people wouldn't call that real clothes, but for me, it was. And that actually made a really big difference. And along that same line was deliberately adding structure to my day. So I think there were a lot of reasons why so many people fell into depression during COVID, during the lockdowns. Like, oh my God, why wouldn't you? Look around. Like the world was ending. But I also think for a lot of people, they were used to waking up, getting ready, getting in their car and having a commute, going to the office, seeing these people, having a lunch break, driving home, doing their night routine. And now it's like that vanished like overnight for a lot of people. And the structure just disappeared and their whole day kind of felt very blobby, I guess, for lack of a better word. There was no separation between like starting work and stopping work and what was home life and what wasn't, and when would you do your workouts or when would you eat or get dressed or shower. And I think that just exacerbated a lot of people's feelings of depression, because when you're depressed you feel like slow and lazy and kind of gross and literally depressed, right? And I think deliberately adding like some kind of scheduling back into your day, even if it's just one thing, like you mentioned, the shower, even if it's just like, I will have dinner at 5 o'clock every night, and you start doing that, having some structure to your day, I think is really good for your brain. You know, we look at like children, everybody says like when you're dealing with toddlers, they need structure. They need a schedule. They'll do so much better with structure. Children need structure. And like with Daisy and Desmond, they do so much better with structure. And having them here for the past year has really just taught me like we're all just big babies. Like all of the things that they struggle with, I'm just like, oh man, I have totally felt that way. Oh, you didn't get a nap today, Desmond? That's why you're being so cranky. I get it. And when I see that how well they do with structure, it helps me recognize how much better we tend to do with structure also.
Oh yeah. I think those are all great points. And now I thought of another one.
Go for it.
And, paying attention to your thoughts. I think that's the biggest one. Out of everything that I could say is to practice mindfulness. Practicing mindfulness, meditating if you're interested. But you don't have to meditate to practice mindfulness. You can like just start noticing the thoughts that you're having and start reflecting on them, whether that's through meditating or through journaling or just through paying attention to the present moment and kind of noticing the thoughts coming in and out. Like, what kinds of thoughts are you having? Probably not very nice ones if you're feeling down. Are you feeling worthless? Start reflecting on that thought. Why are you feeling this way? Like, who's making you feel this way? Is there a reason that you're feeling this way? Like, reflect on the thought, because a lot of the times, like, I can say I'm worthless, but if I really think on that thought, like, where is that coming from? I don't know, because I don't have anyone in my life. Some people do, unfortunately, but I don't have anyone in my life specifically who makes me feel worthless other than myself. Like, I'm the one making myself feel that way because I look at other people around me, I'm comparing myself, like I'm the one making me feel that way. And maybe you do have someone in your life who's making you feel worthless. So maybe consider like, is it worth having that person in your life? Like start reflecting on the thoughts that you're having. Like, maybe you're feeling lonely. Why are you feeling that way? What are things that you could be doing differently? Like talking to yourself. I talk to myself. I literally go to the mirror and talk to myself sometimes because it just helps me. I'm not a super big on journaling specific, like for me personally, just because I just don't. I mean, I wouldn't mind getting into it at some point, but it's just not something that I do. I prefer just meditating and kind of just noticing my thoughts. Whereas some people really, really benefit from journaling and just writing everything out and getting all of their thoughts out. Maybe that's beneficial for you or whoever's listening to this. But just noticing your thoughts is so important because then you can actually recognize what's going on. Like why, I mean, even asking yourself in the moment, like, why am I feeling this way? And maybe you won't have an answer, and that's okay. Continue to ask yourself. And sometimes things come up that we wouldn't have ever even really thought about. So it can be really helpful just to talk to yourself. And honestly, usually we have the best answers. Like the most I talk to myself, I'm like, okay, like I can figure this out. But it can also be helpful, like we've mentioned, to have a professional to talk about those thoughts with. They might be able to reflect on things. Maybe just a good friend might be able to reflect on things with you. But really, really noticing your thoughts is so important. And then just practicing any kind of mindfulness skill, whether like sometimes I used to start like every therapy session with a mindfulness skill. Like we would just play a game together, but you can do it alone. You can just sit outside your window, watch the cars go by and just pay attention to the colors of each car, or go on a walk and look at all the different plants and notice all the things, notice your footsteps, like just being completely present in that moment. No distractions. You're not watching, videos while you're walking, you're not texting while you're walking, you're not listening to music while you're walking, you're just walking and you're being mindful and you're paying attention. That can be so, so, so beneficial. And then with that, paying attention to the things that you're taking in, because sometimes when I'm feeling really, really anxious, I realize like, oh, wow, I've been listening to Crime Junkie, which is a crime podcast about murder and about people that have gone missing. And I'm like, one night I'm not sleeping well. And I'm like, okay, well, I've been listening to Crime Junkie for like 2 days straight. Maybe I should not do that. Maybe that's not benefiting me. Maybe that's making me feel anxious. Paying attention to the content you're taking in is important. Maybe you're feeling down about your body. What are you looking at on Instagram or Facebook? Maybe you're looking at a bunch of models. Maybe that's not benefiting you. There's so many things to pay attention to when you're feeling sad or when you're feeling down. And And like we said, it's not easy getting out of this, but it's important. All of these tips and skills are important to practice over time, and you don't have to do them all at once, but
Yeah.
in the long run, it'll be beneficial to pick them up one by one.
Yeah, I had a couple of similar things on my list as well. So mindfulness activities. To add to that, I would say start with a small amount of time. Like, start with 2 minutes or something. Like you said, looking out the window and noticing the colors of cars. Start with just a couple of minutes, because I know that when your brain is just like swimming in terrible thoughts, sometimes being mindful can be very painful at first. So don't expect yourself to just sit down to a 30-minute mindfulness session right out of the gate. Just start small and work your way up. I also, along the lines of journaling, was to kind of keep track of your triggers and moods. So like you were mentioning the Crime Junkie podcast or Instagram, like, or maybe a certain person in your life, you realize every time they come around, your mood takes a turn for the worse, or somebody that comes around and your mood takes a turn for the better. Like, these are things to start to pay attention to. And it can be hard, again, when you've just been focusing on like how bad you feel. Another journaling tip would be, it doesn't have to be a journal, but to practice gratitude. And we kind of touched upon this at the beginning. I actually do literally keep a gratitude journal. It's just in my phone, so it's easy and easy for me to do. Like, I'm a big fan of convenience. If something is like hard, I'm not gonna do it.
Yeah.
But when I started doing it, it was really challenging to come up with things that I was grateful for. Now I almost like have to stop myself, because I could just keep listing things, and I'm no Pollyanna. You guys know that. You've been listening to this podcast probably for a long time. Like, I'm not that person who's just like got rainbows coming out of my ears, but still, I think you can find like lots of things to be grateful for every single day. And all of the science shows that people who do that are happier. A gratitude journal is not a cure for depression, but like Athena said, all these little things, they do add up to just a smoother path. And they're all relatively simple things too. So, the hard work will happen in therapy of some kind, or, it doesn't have to be a therapist, because I do want to point out, like, not everybody has access to that. And that's really challenging. I would say, a trusted friend or family member can be really, really helpful. And you can even buy like some workbooks online. No insurance.
DBT.
Yes, that's what I was going to recommend.
Yeah, the DBT workbook. You can buy that online. You can get it for free online. I mean, you can like find pages of it online for free. All the pages are online.
But I think you can buy the whole workbook for like $20 or something.
I haven't.
And it's really, really good. I have found DBT to be the most valuable type of therapy ever for me personally. And if you like my style, which is very like, we're going to find solutions and actual things you can do, that's like almost entirely what DBT is, right? It's like, here's tools for your tool belt for all of these different things that could come up. So even if you can't get to a doctor or get to a therapist, you can still investigate some of those avenues in other ways as well.
Yeah, there's books, podcasts, just reading from professionals online. I've talked about things like psychology.com or Psychology Today. That's a good one. There's lots of avenues, because therapy is a privilege, and I won't ever negate that fact. It is true. So yeah, there's other resources though, like podcasts, books, websites.
Yeah. I think the only other thing that I would add, it's not really a thing that you can do, but it's something that I would recommend against doing, would be, if you think you're in the middle of like a major depressive episode, try not to make any major life decisions right then, because you're not seeing things very clearly at the moment. And a lot of times you can just be like, well, everything sucks. My life is terrible. I'm just going to pack up all my shit and leave. I'm going to just leave my life completely. And I mean, listen, you do you at the end of the day. But a lot of people that have done that have come to realize that was a huge mistake. And they basically just detonated a grenade in the middle of their life that they can't come back from. And that is certainly not going to help you be less depressed when you come to that realization. So just be careful about that, I would say.
That's a good addition.
Yeah. And then, of course, it's funny we didn't actually mention this, but because I think it's because we've mentioned it in so many other podcasts, but eating nutritiously and exercise, guys, like those should be almost first lines of defense. And I understand how hard both of those things are to do when you're battling depression, but obviously eating a diet that is rich in phytochemicals, minerals, protein, fiber, healthy fats, all of that stuff is really going to help you make sure you don't have any vitamin deficiencies, because vitamin deficiencies can make depression worse, right? And certain ones can trigger a depressive episode. So eat well. And moving your body, like we talked about in I think it was the stress episode a couple episodes ago, like how stress affects the body. Depression is a form of stress to your body. So exercise is like one of the first lines of defense for that. So to Athena's point way at the beginning, yes, doctors will recommend a prescription as that's the first thing they're going to recommend, is that you try a prescription. And I'm not against that necessarily. But I think, and this is just my opinion, but before someone goes a pharmaceutical route, they should make sure that all the other pieces, the nutrition, the exercise, getting fresh air, having a support system, getting decent sleep, all of those things should be as good as you can get them on your own. And sometimes you can't get them very good without medication, but you should really work on those things first before you start to go a medication route.
I 1000% concur with that. And there's a huge opioid crisis right now. So there's, that's not great. And I want to also just add one thing with the exercise is that you don't have to go big. Like you don't have to train for a marathon to get in some exercise. You don't have to even go to the gym to get exercise if that's not where you want to start. You can start with doing a 10-minute video at home, or going to the park and just doing some pull-ups. Like you don't have to start big to start. And I think that's really important, because I think a lot of the time when we're feeling overwhelmed, we feel like we have to go all out, and we don't. We can just start. Just go for the walk. Just do a push-up. Like just start. That's all that really matters, is that, you know, you're trying, and that makes a difference, because every day you're going to feel just a little bit better, even if it's not, you know, a huge thing. You're going to feel a little bit better every single day, and eventually, hopefully, better for the most of the time. But going outside is also important. Just getting the sunshine, if you have sunshine where you're at. But yeah, I think this was a really good discussion so far.
Yeah, I think so too. And if anybody has any questions, or you just need some support, you know, you can always shoot us an email, coach@veganproteins.com. You will definitely get a response from one of us almost right away. Okay. And if anybody is, you know, really suffering, reach out to one of the hotlines. If you're in a real dire situation, call 911 if you have to. But, you know, if you're not there and you just want some support, you can always reach out to us. All right, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Vegan Proteins Muscles by Brussels Radio. If you are interested in any kind of coaching at all, go to veganproteins.com. We have our membership, we have our challenges, and we have our one-on-one coaching. You can also find us on Instagram. I'm Vegan Proteins, and Athena is I Am Just Athena. And we also have a YouTube channel, Vegan Proteins. You can find us there as well. Once again, thanks so much for tuning in. My name is Danny.
I'm Athena.
And we will talk to you soon.
Toodles.